want to report to you today on the people who make the laws that you and I have to obey. Now, when taxes are passed, when money is appropriated for the Army, the Navy, for a new post office, when a law is passed that would put us into jail if we don't obey it, just who are the people who pass these laws? Well, you'll say the Congress of the United States, and of course you're right. But Congress is a big, unwieldy body, 531 members. So who actually runs the Congress? Who steers it, guides its work, sometimes puts it into line? Actually, a lot of things happen in the backstage lobbies and cloakrooms of Congress that the public doesn't have any idea about. I happen to have watched Congress a long time. I've seen a lot of senators and congressmen come and go. So I'd like to take you backstage and tell you who really runs the Congress and passes the laws that you and I have to follow. I'll report further in just a minute. As you know, the Senate of the United States is called the most exclusive club in the world. Just 96 members. And one rule is that no one of these members may criticize the other, at least in the Senate. They do say things about each other in private that almost burn the paint off the Senate walls, but never on the Senate floor. However, the two leaders of the Senate, Lyndon Johnson of Texas, Democrat, and William Nolan of California, Republican, happen to be very good friends. They're supposed to oppose each other, and sometimes they do make bitter speeches against each other's position. But I've often seen them putting their heads together, figuring out how they can help each other, and after a heated debate, walking into the cloakroom almost arm in arm. I've known Senator Johnson since he was a handsome young congressman from Texas, following Sam Rayburn around almost like a puppy dog. Now he's just as important as the man whose suitcase he used to carry. He can block a bill in committee, or he can pass a bill. If he doesn't like you, if you as a senator cross him, you're likely to find your bills gathering dust in committee. Johnson is head of the Democrats, but his methods are not exactly democratic. For 2 whole years, he didn't hold a single party caucus where Democrats could debate in democratic fashion. Johnson settles problems by private huddles. He's one of the smoothest talkers in Washington. And when he gets alone with anyone, he can usually talk a senator out of his position, or it's said, a bird out of a tree. He runs the Senate by telephone or by private huddle. And I can report that he's the most skilled political technician I have ever seen on Capitol Hill, and I've seen quite a few. Johnson's greatest failing is when he puts his own interest ahead of national interest. For instance, he keeps a very careful eye on the Senate Interstate Commerce Committee because it passes the laws governing radio and television, and Johnson's family has become quite wealthy from the ownership of radio and TV stations. In fact, he contrived to get one of the first TV licenses after the TV freeze was removed. He's done some fine things in the Senate, but also he's turned handsprings for the gas and oil lobby. He rides their airplanes back and forth to Texas, receives campaign funds from them, goes on weekend parties with them, and split the Democratic Party wide open by passing a gas bill for them, which Eisenhower vetoed. Now, the second most important man in the Senate never makes a speech. He's Carl Hayden of Arizona, Dean of the Senate, 80 years old, who runs away from headlines, but is probably among the 10 most powerful men in the United States because he's chairman of the Appropriations Committee, which passes upon every penny spent by the United States. Hayden never throws his weight around, but he's a shrewd horse trader. He'll give another senator a post office or a harbor improvement, or will dredge out a river in return for a vote on some other bill. That's how the laws that you and I have to follow are sometimes passed. It was Senator Hayden who drove the first nail into Senator McCarthy's political coffin by insisting that the Senate look into McCarthy's finances. Hayden even telephoned Senator Mike Monroney in Italy when Monroney had sneaked away from work on the committee and told Monroney either to get back to the United States and go to work or resign. Hayden finally took Monroney's place, and today, locked up in Hayden's safe, are some interesting unpublished records on Joe McCarthy. Another powerful senator who writes the laws but avoids the headlines is Richard Russell of Georgia. spokesman for the Southern Bloc who has organized it into a very potent minority. Most people don't know it, but Senator Russell always keeps a Southern senator on the floor, even during the dreariest debate, as a watchdog to protect Southern interests. One reason the state of Georgia has so many military and Air Force bases is because Senator Russell is chairman of the Armed Services Committee, and he's also ranking member of the Appropriations Committee. Now on the Republican side, Senator Nolan of California moves along a legislative course like a charging rhinoceros, head down and straight ahead. His job as Republican Senate leader calls for quarterbacking, but he plays more like a fullback, always plunging the line. Nolan runs the Senate by sheer hard work. What he lacks in political skill, he makes up in determination. There's nothing secretive about Bill Nolan. His fellow senators know exactly where he stands. He couldn't tell a lie even if he wanted to, though I've never found that he wanted to. He won't tell you much, but he won't lie. Now, because Nolan is headstrong and is frequently in disagreement with Eisenhower, the White House sometimes bypasses him, working through Vice President Nixon, once a bitter rival of Nolan's, or through Senator Leverett Saltonstall of Massachusetts. This blue-blood gentleman of impeccable manners and irreproachable conduct is almost too refined for the brawling political arena of Capitol Hill, yet he's a quiet power in the Senate, chiefly because he's a pipeline for the White House. When Chairman Adams wants something done in the Senate, he frequently calls on Saltonstall. Another powerful Republican senator is Styles Bridges of New Hampshire. Bridges plays his political cards with the skill of a Lyndon Johnson. He's been around Washington longer than any other Republican senator, has his job holders planted in every branch of government, has a bureaucrat intelligence system that's unmatched even by Sherman Adams. He and Sherman Adams, incidentally, do not get along. Both were once governors of New Hampshire. Both are shrewd New England politicians, both among the most powerful men in Washington. One in the White House, the other in the Senate. Both are Republicans, but they just don't like each other. However, Senator Bridges, as top Republican on the Appropriations Committee, can even tell the White House, and does tell it, where to get off on certain laws. He passes the laws. The White House can only propose the laws. Well, these are the men who chiefly run the Senate of the United States, the most powerful legislative body in the world. In a minute, a report on who runs the House of Representatives. The two men who ride herd on the sometimes unruly, unwieldy House of Representatives are both bastards. Speaker Sam Rayburn of Texas and ex-Speaker Joe Martin of Massachusetts. Both are good friends. Both agree on many things. Both drop in to see the other to swap ideas on what laws should be passed or blocked. Because Joe Martin is a Taft Republican, not too sympathetic with Eisenhower, actually the White House leans heavily on the number 2 Republican in the House, Congressman Charlie Halleck of Indiana. Halleck is the man who whips Republicans into line when the Eisenhower administration is hard up for votes, as it frequently is. But the real power in the House is with the Democrats. Two men control, one from the South, Sam Rayburn, one from the North, John McCormack of Massachusetts. Both are kindly, humanitarian, legislative dictators, but their word is law. Few congressmen defy them and live politically to get very far. John McCormack is gracious and considerate, will take time to help the smallest of his constituents, yet he helps run the Congress with an iron hand concealed in a silk glove. Sam Rayburn has helped pass more important laws than any other man in history. He came to Washington in the days of Woodrow Wilson, and he can look back on the great crises of this nation for 40 years. When it comes to running Congress, Sam has certain rigid ideas. They don't change. They do affect your pocketbook. He will not appoint on the Ways and Means Committee a new congressman who does not believe in the 27.5% oil depletion allowance. This is the big tax bonanza for Texas and other oil men. And Sam wants to keep that bonanza for them. It means that you and I pay more taxes to make up for this tax write-off, thanks to the fact that their friend Sam Rayburn makes sure that no one is appointed to the Tax-Writing Ways and Means Committee who will change that law. Sam Rayburn is getting a bit grumpy today, even tells Eisenhower when he will or will not come to the White House for a conference. But no man in Congress dares buck him. He, more than any other man in Washington, perhaps, even more than Eisenhower, will decide whether your children have new schools through a new school bill, or whether you will have to pay more for your cooking gas next year. Well, those are the men who really run Congress. I'll have a final word in just a minute. As I said a minute ago, our congressional system does have faults, but by and large, it's a good system run by good men. But there's one thing you can do to make it better. Keep in touch with your congressman. He's always subject to pressure from the lobby, so you can counteract that pressure. If you're a housewife, a mother, a school teacher, a businessman, a student, write your congressman or go to see him. That's one way in our system of representative government that you can help make democracy live. Now, next week, I'll report on what President Eisenhower will be thinking about as he drives up Pennsylvania Avenue to take the oath of office.